Hello, this is DariesFrost, here on my phone, a list of all the genders. I'm gonna do my best to name and describe them all. Let's do this. A bime gender. A gender that is profound, deep, and infinite, meant to resemble when one mirror is reflecting to another mirror, creating an infinite paradox. Adamasgender, a gender which refuses to be categorized. Aerogender, a gender that is influenced by your surroundings. Aesthetigender. Oh god, I'm killing these names. A gender that is derived from an aesthetic, also known as vitagender. Affectugender. A gender that is affected by mood swings. Agender, the feeling of no gender / absence of gender or neutral gender. Agender flex, being mostly agender except having a small shift towards other gender, making them demigenders because of the constancy of being agender. Alexagender, a gender that is fluid between more than one gender, but the individual cannot tell what those genders are. Eliasgender? I think I got that. A gender which is removed from common gender descriptors and guidelines. Amargender, a gender that changes depending on who you're in love with. Ambigender, ambigender, defined as having the feeling of two genders simultaneously without fluctuation, meant to be reflect the concept of being ambidextrous only with gender. Amboneck. Identifying as both man and woman, yet neither at the same time. Mayaka-gender, a gender that changes depending on which friend you're with. Androgen, sometimes used in the case of androgynous presentation, describes the feeling of being a mix of both masculine and feminine and sometimes neutral gender qualities. Anisigender, feeling like a certain gender, yet being more comfortable with identifying with another. Angenital, a desire to be without primary sexual characteristics without necessarily being genderless. One may be both angenital and identify as any other gender alongside. Anogender, a gender that fades in and out but always comes back to the same feeling. A non-gender, that's literally the name, a non-gender, but pushed into one word. A non-gender? I don't know. A non-gender, a gender that is unknown to both yourself and others. Antigender. Antigender. A protean gender which has the potential to be anything, but is formless and motionless, and therefore does not manifest as any particular gender. Ansigender, a gender that is affected by anxiety. Oh, it's probably called angsty gender then, not ansigender. Okay. Apagender. A feeling of apathy towards one's gender which leads them to not look any further into it. Apkonsugender, a gender where you know what it isn't, but not what it is. The gender is hiding itself from you. Astrogender, a gender that feels bright and celestial. Astrogender, A gender that feels connected to space. Autogender. A gender experience that's deeply personal to oneself. Axigender. When a person experiences two genders that's on opposite ends of an axis, one being a gender and the other being any gender. These genders are experienced one at a time, no overlapping, and with very short transition time. Bigender. The feeling of having two genders either at the same time or separately, usually used to describe feeling traditionally male and traditionally female, but does not have to. Biogender. A gender that feels connected to nature in some way. Blur gender. The feeling of having more than one gender that are somehow blurred together to the point of not being able to distinguish or identify individual genders. Synonyms with gender fuzz. Boy flux. When one feels mostly or all male most of the time, but experiences fluctuating intensity of male identity. Burst gender. And gender that comes in intense bursts of feeling and quickly fades back to the original state. Chaos gender. A gender which shares qualities with outer space or has the aesthetic of space, stars, nebula, etc. Caste gender. The feeling of gender is unimportant to you. Caste flux. When the level of indifference towards your gender fluctuates. Kavas gender. For people with depression, when you feel one gender when not depressed and another when depressed. Sind gender. When your gender changes between one and its opposite. Siderofluid. When you are a siderogender and your feelings fluctuate between masculine, feminine, and neutral. Heterogender, a non-binary gender with specific masculine, feminine, or neutral feelings. Cisgender, the feeling of being the gender you were assigned at birth all the time. Cloudgender, a gender that cannot be fully realized or seen clearly due to depersonalization. Oh my god, I can't pronounce it. Okay. Depersonalization/derealization disorder. Cologender, the feeling of having too many genders simultaneously to describe each one. Color gender, a gender associated with one or more colors and the feelings, hues, emotions, and or objects associated with that color may be used like pink gender, blue gender, yellow gender. There's a color gender. Oh my god. I never knew these. Comogender. When you know you aren't cisgender, but you settle with your assigned gender for the time being. Condigender. A gender that's only felt during certain circumstances. Oh my god. Why the long words? Delicia gender. From the Latin word delicia, meaning, favorite. Meaning the feeling of having more than one simultaneous gender, yet preferring one that fits better. Demifluid. The feeling of your gender being fluid throughout all the demigenders. The feeling of having multiple genders, some static and some fluid. Demiflux. The feeling of having multiple genders, some static and some fluctuating. Demigender. A gender that is partially one gender and partially another. Domgender. Having more than one gender, yet being more dominant than the others. Demi-vapor. Continuously drifting to other genders, feeling spiritually transcendental when doing so, while having a clear, slightly blurred individual of your genders, transitions, and positive emotions. Tied to demi-smoke. Demi-smoke, a transcendental Spiritual gender, roughly drifting to other genders that are unable to be foreseen and understood, shrouded in darkness when you're individual, elevating through mystery, caused by lack of inner interpretation and dark emotional states. Tied to doing favor. Dura gender, from the Latin word dura, meaning long lasting. Well, it comes from. That's word duration. Dura meaning long lasting. So, sorry, I'm getting off track. Meaning a subcategory of multigender in which one gender is more identifiable, long-lasting, prominent than the other gender. It's been 10 minutes already. It's going to take a while. Ego gender, a gender that is so personal to your experience that can only be described as you. Epicene. Epicene? 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 Sorry. I'm an idiot. Sometimes used similarly with the adjective androgynous, the feeling either having or not displaying characteristics of both or either binary gender, sometimes used to describe feminine male identifying individuals. Espigender. 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 Just do what you want with that name. A gender that is related to being a spirit or exist on a higher or extra dimensional plane. Is that like two-spirit? Is it like two-spirit? It's probably not like two-spirit. It's probably not. X-gender. The outright refusal to expect or identify in, on, or around the gender spectrum. Existi-gender. A gender that only exists or feels present when thought about or when a conscious effort is made to notice it. Femme-fluid. Having fluctuating or fluid gender feelings that are limited to feminine genders. Femme-gender. A non-binary gender which is feminine in nature. Fluid flux. The feeling of being fluid between two or more genders that also fluctuate in intensity. A combination of gender fluid and gender flux. Jimmy gender. Having two opposite genders that work together, being fluid and flux together. Gender blank. A gender that can only be described as a blank space. When gender is called into question, all that comes into mind is a blank space. Blank space. Gender flow. A gender that is fluid between infinite feelings. Gender fluid. The feeling fluidity within your gender identity. Feeling different gender as time passes or as situations change. Not restricted to any number of genders. Gender flux. The feeling of your gender fluctuating in intensity. Like gender fluid between one gender and a gender. Gender fuzz. The feeling of having more than one gender that are somehow blurred together to the point of not being able to distinguish or identify individual genders, synonyms with blur gender, as I spoke about earlier. Gender neutral, the feeling of having a neutral gender, whether somehow in between masculine, feminine, or a third gender that is separate from binary, often paid with, I think that's pronounced neutrois. Gender punk, a gender that actively resists gender norms. Never knew that. Gender queer, originally used as an umbrella term for non-binary. Okay. Gender queer. Originally used as an umbrella term for non-binary individuals, may be used as an identity described as non-binary gender, regardless of whether the individual is masculine or feminine leaning. Yes! Did it. Gender witch. Gender witched. A gender in which one is intrigued or entranced by the idea